Everyone. Thank you so much for attending yet another lecture that I was trying to put together for the last couple of months. This is one of the things that are the most probably important thing about AI nowadays. It is how we can actually safeguard it and see how we can actually maximize the benefit and minimize the damage, which is not something that a lot of the AI folks are thinking about, obviously. So initially, I was thinking about doing one lecture. I ended up actually cutting it into three different components. One is talking about the laws, law in healthcare in general, and the AI. And the second will be the regulations, and the third will be the ethics. So I began with the law topic just to kind of bring it to where the law in healthcare had been colliding, and also see how adding AI to the mix is changing a lot. So before I want to start, I want to say this is not a long lecture. I actually made it as short as possible because I want to open the forum for you to participate by typing, by voice, because you also bring a perspective that helps me and helps others see from different perspective about these challenges because you deal with them on a daily basis. And I chose this weird word, praxis, instead of practice, intentionally. And I was influenced by a book that I read a few years ago by Paulo Freire, who was one of the ones that kind of coined it in the way that we use it nowadays, which is quite different from the practice. So the praxis is more of a strategy activity in its relationship to organizational, institutional, and societal context. It's just like the habit of doing something. It's of thinking deeply of why is that being done, how is it done, and what are the consequences. The practice is just like, yeah, I'm following the rules. I stop at the right time because that's how we actually do it. We wash our hands before a certain procedure. It's more of a procedural activity. Uh, and sometimes you use such procedural activities to strategize, to say, okay, we actually have to cut loss, for example. Cutting cost is one of the practices that we have to do in our strategy, or we have to minimize job like loss or something like that. So you have certain practices you can apply to strategy, but the concept of about thinking of the concepts that you're working with or the strategies is the important part. And practitioners are all of us stakeholders, from doctors to coordinators to consultants to CEOs. We act as strategy actors, and some people are actually not in that place to act as strategy actors. And that's why us as physicians have to become more familiar with these issues and bring more experts. And I actually would suggest bringing a panel at one point to this conference because a colleague of mine here is an MD JD, so he's both a lawyer and a physician, and he also is kind of dabbling with AI world and seeing how it actually interacts with this topic. So this is about why I wanted to choose a praxis and highlight it and bring law to the mix. And of course, practice, again, as we said, it's just procedural. Practice is more about have a theory about what you want to do, and you apply it, you reflect on it, and you kind of iterate. It requires critical reflection and action to improve and change it. So it's not like, okay, this is the procedure and protocol for hand washing. No, you actually have to think about why am I doing that? Is it the best way? So this is very different from just practicing. And it is also kind of confined to academic and educational and political context, but it is something that we should probably be applying more often in our day-to-day actions. And eventually, there is a synthesis of a theory that end up guiding a practice afterward from the praxis experience. Now, the second component of the topic was after the malpraxis, which is not doing the praxis appropriately, is the law that actually brings that concept of knowledge, why and how. So what comes to your mind when you hear the word law? Any ideas, any things that you would like to?
Medical legal problems.
Okay. But law as a concept by itself.
A set of rules, I would say, to reinforce the
Okay.
principle that collectively the society agreed on.
Nice. Okay. How how modern, how live is it? So
Usually, it's old. It's not current.
yes.
Usually,
Exactly. There are laws that are dating back to the 5000 BC. Like we're still actually practicing. There are other concepts that we still have from like antiquity. So it's antiquated, right? It's old. It's like the old wisdom that we're trying to protect from happening. Do not kill. Thou not should not kill. From the day of like Abel and his fallout with his brother, it's like okay, now we have a law. It is archaic in a sense, and it's outdated in a lot of fields, and this is another problem where you have a moving picture and it's unimaginative. It's remember the statue that is blind and holding the scale. This is how it doesn't want to imagine. It want to be very concrete in it, what says yes and no to, and doesn't have much kind of uh, attention to what's around it. And it's retrospective. It waits for something to happen to say, this should not happen, and I'm going to block that from happening, and this is how I'm going to do it. So it's always retrospective. And a lot of times it is harmful just because of that nature of it actually trying to constrain in the maybe wrong ends and open the other ends loose for other players to take whatever they want from it. So it is about what happened, not what's coming. And this is an era that is very, very, very new to our humanity. It is very different from anything that we have seen, especially with AI. And really trying to wait for something to happen before you act is very dangerous. And that is why us as stakeholders, as people who practice with healthcare and AI, should be paying attention to law and healthcare and regulations. So, so healthcare and law is seeing a huge like race between big players, like multi-billion, trillion-dollar companies racing towards something that they see as the winning prize. It is really vague for the most people who are actually going to be affected by it. This is a very oligarchical nature of win that they're going to get because all the benefit will be constrained in a small group of people and there's going to be a lot of collateral damage. And that is something that we still don't know what type of damage we're going to be getting until it happens. And this is a big problem. So it's more about how can we regulate or dysregulate this industry to make sure there are safeguards from what's going to happen even before it happens in a sense, because there are going to be some praxis concepts that we create to say, thou shalt not kill. So similarly, something similar to what the AI should not do or should be responsible for regardless of how. So rules and regulations are a bit different, and you have to understand like how things are. Like rules are like just guidelines of conduct, and like it's in a general sense, and it can be adjusted accordingly, and cannot be enforced by can be enforced by authorities. The regulations is an executive function that you do. You can say, okay, now I'm gonna be acting upon this, and it has to be used in the legal sense. It's not as general, and it should be rigid. Like you cannot go and do this. Like you cannot take data and expose it to a company that's going to be used against that person. It's a regulation. It is something that needs to be set in stone, but it also futuristic. Like I'm preventing things from happening, although this is a very rigid, very kind of a absolute term, but it is trying to prevent the future of what's going to happen. And it typically has to come from a body or an executive authority. And typically things are starting in a very weird way nowadays in this world. We're going to start with tweets or truths, axes, whatever you're going to call it, to a policy memo nowadays, to a regulation, to a statute. Whereas typically how law works, you have a constitution, that has laws that then you have to act on them. There are going to be acts by the governing body that's going to set rules and regulations. So we're actually starting retrospectively or like against the current of what we should be doing in a society. So not only that we have a problem of how we actually are escalating things, we also have a very slow process of sending from a constitution into a regulation. Historically, it took millennia, uh, like really long centuries, or at least years for something to get constitutionally dribbled down to a regulation to prevent. So really, we have to start by saying, okay, we need to start by putting standards. Okay, for example, in healthcare, interoperability should be a standard that is not to be given away, and this is against what a lot of what's happening in healthcare nowadays. Quality assurance, it always should be focused on quality, not quantity. This is a very important part of healthcare. It is about how you get to 95% to a 99%. It's not the saying, okay, we can do instead of 195%, 10, 90%, and we're fine with that. This is not the trajectory to try to deliver healthcare with a mentality. Or market access, where you actually start to break monopolies and open for a competition, innovation, risk mitigation. It should be early on. And there should be frameworks that guide that has some flexibility and some maturity assessment to say where things will be going or not, and how helpful or how harmful they're going to be. And you have to optimize for the resources that you're going to have. And you have to align with values and needs of society, of government, and stakeholders in general. And then comes the law and regulation part of this. So I'm going to start by talking about law in healthcare before the point of AI and see that we've actually been kind of dabbling with stuff that is very related to AI even before it happened. And remember, healthcare law is a series of trade-offs. It's not like really just a set of rules, because everything that you put on actually harms from another end or has some binary relationship. So privacy versus sharing. This is very important to say, okay, how much privacy should that person be getting, and how much sharing is going to actually help others? For example, an HIV positive patient, who should they disclose the private information to, and how and what? Autonomy versus safety. You have the right to die, but do you have the right to actually drive a car 80 miles an hour while drunk and hit someone? But this is not part of like safety is becoming an issue. Safety of others per se. Access versus institutional control. Like up until now, patients do not have access or ownership to their records. They have access to a view only a specific part of their medical records. So basically, they don't have access in the way that they should as owners of that data. For example, the institution controls everything and uses it as a leverage to keep them in the loop or like in the business model. And again, innovation and oversight. And this is a big battle all the time. Why? Because on one end, the innovators will say, leave us so we can create and do stuff, and the regulations are going to slow us down, and so and so. But also, without that, you're going to end up with a Facebook-like product that has caused more harm than benefit. You're going to end up with more of that as we especially leave things unregulated in an era of really accelerating speed towards a very uncertain and dire future in some senses. And there's another complicating factor. Healthcare law is an industry, is a sector that benefits from the status quo, right? You don't want them to have new rules to actually work with, or like new laws to address, or new challenges. So they want to protect and say, oh, you know, want to focus on malpractice and so, and the archaic way, because now we know the rules and regulations that we actually need to deal, and we know how to kind of delegate this case and so. So this is an industry of like $61 billion that we cannot actually go and change easily, because you're going to have folks who are going to be resisting that are part of the environment that you're going to try to work against, or like work against the interest, or the sole interest, or like personal interest. So even before the AI era, we've been having issues with privacy, data sharing, and cybersecurity in healthcare. This is from the beginning of us becoming digitized and computerized. So CPRS from the VA system, which is the first AMR system that was created in the United States, is from 1978. It's been a long time ago. That needed a lot of privacy, data sharing, and cybersecurity measures from that time. This is even before the internet was actually a thing. And so you also have to balance, okay, I need to share enough PHI for the treatment, operation, and care coordination, but also I have to respect HIPAA compliance rules on the level of administrative, physical, and even technical safeguards. And there's always, after the breach, the legal question becomes, okay, risk analysis, notice, and whether safeguards were reasonable. So again, the nature of the retrospectivity and of it. Until it happens, we cannot actually go and do much because we don't sit down and imagine scenarios of what's going to happen that we're going to actually act upon. And this is where the praxis concept becomes very important. And we live in societies that are very interesting, that you have think tanks that sits down and say, we're going to simulate a scenario where Martians actually attack Earth and they're advanced and they have these type of so and so. How can we act to mitigate these certain risks and to get like a footage, or let's get a gameplay towards this weird scenario. There are scenarios of, okay, this country is going to attack that country and this is what's going to happen. How can we position ourselves in this game, like a game theory play, to actually get the most out of or the least amount of damage? We don't do that in a lot of the laws that we actually try to work on, and we do not do that a lot with AI. We actually almost never do it unless there are some like small groups of activists who are trying to take that lead. There's the other part of like, okay, informed consents and patient choice. How a valid consent requires you need to disclose certain material uh, for you to actually be to get you have to consent to that part, okay, and you have to explain what are the risks, alternatives, and certainly uncertainty that must be there. Like for example, you are a proceduralist, I am a proceduralist, I'm gonna do a central line or something. I have to sit down and say, I'm not sure what's going to happen. The chance of this is going to be so and so. The worst case scenario is one so and so. And if that happens to, this is my medication plan. So they then, when they consent to a specific unknowns. Like there's no chance of them developing cancer from the central line, right? It's out of the realm of possibility, but there are chances of developing so and so and so. And now I actually have outlined that. Consent in the era of AI is very weird because you don't know what's going to happen with that amount of data that you're actually gushing to these systems. So there are millions of venues of this going wrong, actually. And you don't actually disclose that to the folks who actually stole data from and trained these models and applied on them again to kind of govern or like affect their life in day to day. And of course, there are always capacity limits, emergencies, language. So it's designed that by exception that you actually take away consent. And the era of AI, consent is not even there. Like people who wrote all these like articles for decades and centuries, no one asked them about whether they can be used to train models. No one asks songwriters and filmmakers about, oh, can I use your movie to train this model? And they don't explain to them what that would entail to their practices. Nowadays, we're seeing some industries really being disrupted, and the folks who actually were laid off go and annotate more data. So more of their sector will be destroyed by these models in kind of a vicious circle. And this is something that's foreseeable. Like you can see it because companies want to save on employment, they want to cut costs and so on and so. But other stuff are not seeable through that are going to happen now with this what they call dynamic pricing in the US, where based on your browsing history, the cookies, your zip code, your purchasing history, they will decide, oh, this person, I can extract $200 extra for their hotel booking. So let's do that. The other person sitting next door is not going to be seeing the same pricing, and so many other stuff. Companies, insurance companies, assessing the risk of you being insured and how much we're going to actually make you pay and how much of a risk you're going to be or liability you're going to be to us. All these are actually now kind of inflamed by this gush of data that they are being collected on us. End of life have been something that really been a struggle for like healthcare and law for a long time, right? End of life dispute about who has the autonomy of deciding what happens, the patient, the family, so and so, and how can you actually make sure that this is actually um, uh, eventually solved. And then, okay, can we do stuff against their will? For example, maintaining life against someone's will. Again, it goes back to autonomy, how much autonomy we actually respect in this sector. And this is very important for us actually when we deal with healthcare and law. Autonomy of the person who's been affected is very, very huge. Now put that autonomy in the era of AI and see what type of autonomy you actually are giving or taking away by doing what you're doing with these models. So fraud, billing, kickbacks, and conflict of interest. This is a huge, and this is a weapon now. Like you have companies building technology to optimize billing by really almost like on the verge of fraud or even causing fraud because they want to optimize how much money they drive in. There are other companies on the insurance side saying, oh, you know what, we're going to try to block as much of these claims out of these hospitals or clinics so we can cut costs and refuse as many patient requests for medications so we can actually save money. So these are always these financial incentives working in the background of like third, fourth parties. This is not a single or a bimodal or like a triangular relationship. This is so many stakeholders from so many different industries and interests colliding in a system that is called healthcare, trying to make money out of it. And this is like inflamed in the US, but it's not the only country that has the same problem. There are always consequences. I mean, from the beginning, the FCA and stock laws and AKS in the US have been put there to actually try to govern these scenarios and minimize that abuse of system for the financial incentives. Telehealth in cross-state practices. This is something that also developed over the last, let's say, 10 years or so, and actually, especially after COVID. Telehealth is a modality of care that has been around for quite some time, but it's still very hard for us to govern, especially for the US. Like if you are in Connecticut and you want to have a telehealth consultation with Boston, the one who has to deliver that has to be licensed in both states. And how much actually that actually causes friction unnecessarily, how much actually puts safeguards. It is very troubling. And this is the era of everything being remote. Like imagine you actually having a surgeon who is in Spain doing your orthopedic surgery remotely. Who licenses them? Who insures them? Who actually pays for who actually pays them eventually? And these are all issues that are kind of not new, but it's accelerating in the sense that we cannot actually stop and say, okay, how can we do something about it now to make sure this is going to be something that protects the patient's interest, protects the stakeholders, and ensure everyone's actually winning from this. Information blocking and patient access has been one big problem where every company is trying to kind of harvest as much data and not share any with the person they're actually harvesting from. And some companies actually are incentivized in non-healthcare industries to sell some of the data to other companies that can actually collect even more in resale and resale and resale. Healthcare, they are incentivized of kind of harvesting that data and protecting it from anyone being able to access it, including the patient themselves, because they think, oh, as long as I have the data, I have that relationship, and there are compensatory mechanism for them to come back to me because I have their blood test, I have their so and so, and they already have everything on them. So instead of them going to start from scratch in a different system, they are stuck with me as long as the insurance keeps paying. So all these dynamics are there, and now all this is actually now having a different dynamics as these companies are trying to go to the age of AI, and now not only patient access, is other people's access to these huge data sets that are already been harvested over these decades, and how can they be used for or against the patient's interest. So what ties all of that in the law is like, who controls information and who gets to decide on things that are really multi-stakeholders, but eventually patient-centric, maybe no longer. Who gets access to what? Does Epic have the right to actually combine that data and run models and get insights for themselves or for other third parties? It is still up in the air. No one actually has clear legal vision about how this should be done, but it's being done already. That's the problem. It's that no one is waiting for things to be actually clear legally because it's always easier for them to be sued and pay compensation and say, oh, we didn't mean it, instead of actually waiting for things to be done right. And these are because of malalignment of interest between people developing the technology, people using it, and people being used on. And that's the best practice is always to align policy, document, train, and have a workflow before the crisis hits, which almost never is done. So now I want to bring it to the healthcare law in the era of AI and bring a couple of cases that we probably heard in the news and interacted with. And these are only tidbits of what's going on a daily basis that we don't probably necessarily see making the news, but these actually were interesting. This teenager who actually ended up befriending and falling in love with an AI character ended up in a mental status kind of delusional state and taking his life at age 14. And how did that happen? What type of guardrails were there to protect that teen from so and so? Mother sued and actually got a settlement this year. I'm not sure if it actually finalized or not. And another guy who's a stroke survivor, so probably there was some cognitive loss afterwards, fell in love with celebrity star AI that he actually kind of started to prompt and build. I want this image, this type of personality, so and so. And then she convinced him that she's real, and he died trying to get to her. So these might not necessarily feel it is healthcare related or healthcare approach, but you see the power of convincing that these tools they have, and you wish as a provider they can have the same conviction power for them to stop smoking or do the right things for their health. But these are amazing and very effective tools and very manipulative that are being kind of applied on a massive scale. So AI stakeholders are very diverse. We have individual stakeholders, users, patients, community members, clinicians, developers, and researchers. This is one end. You have the organizational stakeholders like a hospital, the companies that are working with it, like the device companies, the software companies, so and so. And you have the research organizations also trying to see how this organization setting of laws governing data should affect their part of work. Like I want to do research so I can actually optimize the outcomes. I want to get something better. I want to bring something new to the table. So they have different set of guidelines and incentives and outcomes than a lawyer actually sitting on the other end and trying to see, okay, how can I use that or prevent kind of litigation down the road. And of course, they're going to be national and international stakeholders, governments, regulatory bodies, policymakers, and international organizations. And one major problem that we are facing is the discrepancy between us touching the AI on a daily basis, especially you as physician enthusiast about AI, you have much more exposure to than the average person, and you are at the mercy of a bunch of these. I'm sorry, but the average age is about in the 70s. They will need months to understand what a prompt means. They will take them like millennia to understand what the data center impacts are. Yet they are the ones actually eventually arbitrating and making decisions that can affect not only everyone in the US, but across the board. And of course, a bunch of morons who are completely corrupt and single-handedly bought by all these technology companies who are actually legislating for them to actually do more and more of that. So this is a very dangerous topic, and the folks who are arbitrating for it either have no idea about it or are very skewed towards the company's side, away from actually our interests as individuals and as communities, and more towards the industry and making money. And the risk of using AI is not minor. Bias and discrimination means that there's going to be a winner and a loser in any decision, in any conversation, anything. So there's always a loser, and the loser is always the weaker person. So the individuals are the ones who are losing. There are profound impacts on people's lives. It's not only the jobs that are being lost. There is the data centers going and taking energy away from people, taking water in scarce areas, taking like more and more of their land and other resources, whether minerals or any other stuff. Privacy and security issues are only getting worse because it is being weaponized against us. All these technologies that can harvest and analyze data to go after us. And we all heard about what Anthropic and the US government actually had to have a downfall on because of that issue specifically. So now let's start. Why AI changes healthcare law? You add scale, opacity. Like these are like black box models under the in dark rooms being decided. Automations and new actors to a very old healthcare duties. Eventually, you have the duty of protecting the patient. You have the duty of treating them. You have the duty of non-malice. But these are not stuff that are part of what actually is. We don't know if it's part of what's happening in the opaque room, but we can see that it is not. And FDA, for example, started listing the AI-enabled devices, and that was updated recently. But it's not the only body that is governing this, and this is another problem. So you have HHS, CMS, ONC, all these are stakeholders, regulators that are also in the scene from their different perspectives, and they are not necessarily synced and up to date on everything simultaneously. The exposure map. Okay, so let's say there's a cyber attack. Who gets affected? How? Who actually bears the risk? Who bears the burden of making up for it? So and so. Information blocking, HR transparencies. All these are parts that AI nowadays is able to kind of either make solutions or make problems based on. And of course, we know which one that it chose. So we still have the duty of privacy, safety, informed consent, non-discrimination, billing integrity, a licensor. But again, we spoke about how all these could be violated by AI in much faster and much easier, and maybe even without people's knowledge. And it adds a new question. Okay, if we're going to also say who's responsible for it, who trained, who tuned, who monitors the drifts, who is liable when the outcome is wrong, when there was a case of a self-driving car running it was the driver plus the car manufacturer that actually bore the blame. How is it going to work out when it's an AI a surgical robot that actually did something wrong with the surgery? And already there's a case about that. We're probably going to come in our next stuff. Again, this legal stack is multi-agency. You don't have a single body at least putting the praxis of, okay, yes, HSA, yes, CMS, yes, FTC. You all can do your own regulations separately, but this is the praxis that we're going to be doing, or this is the code or the theoretical frame that we're going to be doing or using for us when we regulate this. For example, non-malice, autonomy, informed consent, protection of privacy, even if the privacy is breached, protection of what can happen because of it. Let's say, for example, now healthcare insurances buying data on patients and they're deciding how much they charge and who not to. And then comes something that says, you know what, you have no right of discriminating with your decision of covering or not covering or pricing or not pricing that person based on these highly like tuned models, because you usually take it as a lump sum. You're covering this entire society. You actually are excluding the individual for you to be able to save more money on the pool that you're actually still taking, and you're taking the easier ones, so you're making more money. So all these are not in place yet, unfortunately. So yes, there's always this pressure to innovate. You want to move fast and break things, as Mark Zuckerberg said. You don't want to wait for governance to come and tell you exactly how much you can do what. You want this to come later on. you're much faster than any documentation even. Before even describing what you have done, you actually have moved to the next level. You don't sit down and validate. And we've seen, I don't know if you hear the stories about the Claude kind of co-work agent that is installed in the computers and start deleting files and doing other stuff. No one is waiting for it to be properly documented, properly validated, and then the governance. So if you go and wreak havoc, is Claude going to be responsible for it? Is it Anthropic? No one actually knows who to blame. Oh, it was up to you. There was a big list of like scroll down, scroll down terms of service agreement that you actually signed up. So you actually now own it. So all these are parts of the problems we are dealing with in this industry. And of course, privacy, cybersecurity, and secondary use of healthcare data. We've been kind of touching upon this. Legal risks rise in collection, sharing, security, and downstream use. It should not be fixed to a single point of that. So HIPAA still governs the covered entities business associated, but AI companies and healthcare tools sit partly outside of the classic AI workflow because it has not been rewritten or expanded upon to be able to be used in the age of AI. For example, do you know how many variables I need to know about you to actually identify you as a single point on Earth? 5 maybe is enough. If I said in this zip code, which is mine, there's only one 44-year-old person with hypertension and this type of car. There's only one. There's the chance of having two that fitting the same thing from 5 variables, 5 very general variables. We're talking about nothing that is really unique. You can identify folks. How can HIPAA actually work around this? And this is even before the age of AI. And you see how real-time cases, the cyber attack claims that are nationwide, all the time. United Health that actually had 190 people affected. That's more than half of the U.S. And then actually ended up just doing almost nothing about it. The Good RX that actually had another breach of notification rule focused on sharing patient data. So that she collected stuff and sold it and did a lot of stuff behind the scene without telling anyone. So all these are real-time scenarios that are happening already. So the legal exposure is not only on like the breach, it's on the data, training data, the vendor access, the tracking pixels, the breach response, and patient were they misled about the data use? Were you out front about that before you get the informed consent? It's not just like you're having them scroll in 18 or 80 pages and then say agree and then move on. Were they really told that you are going to sell it to that company and that company is going to use it against them in pricing or so on? So this is not something that is happening in vacuum. It's happening as part of a bigger industry developing around that. And of course, that's the dilemma. Companies, organizations, they want more data to improve AI. So they want less restrictions on that. So how can you actually do that where I want more data poured in models for us to discover cancer treatments very quickly. This is something that is very important to us as societies and so and so. But I do not want that stream of data going to actually optimize how they can price my medication or my health insurance plan or anything else about my health outcome, or deciding I'm going to cover him or not. Or you know what, let's drop him now because now he's a high risk of developing lung cancer in 5 years. So let's do it from now and just kind of bury the tracks. These are things that are happening nowadays and within the realm of possibility. And again, we kind of touch upon what this big issue between the US government and Anthropic, after them asking them, you have to give us tools to actually spawn every American, and they said no. And this is big, but it's not even getting the attention that it deserves on this scale. We talked about anonymity in the age of AI. We are all naked. We are all exposed. Everyone who touched an online entity, anyone who has a bank account or a cell phone account or anything, we are completely exposed because we have the tools of data collection on us plugged into our lives, whether we know it, whether we like it or not. And of course, as I said, there's winners and losers. There is bias towards winners and against losers. Civil rights are being, of course, obliterated by this because algorithmic discrimination the algorithms cannot extrapolate, they interpolate, and this is something we're going to talk about more, meaning they're only going to reach the same consensus we reach as humans. And we have been a very discriminatory species. We have not been right to many groups, poor, colored people, disadvantaged people. So these were carried through in a massive scale now with these algorithms actually taking lead. So this is an example of AI relevance. Rite Aid is a group of it's a pharmacy franchise. It's mostly in the East Coast in the U.S. and they developed this model where they're going to try to use AI system to show, okay, who of these customers can come and steal. So they use the crappy footages from their cameras and so on and so, and did the huge discrimination against a lot of folks and actually called police on them and had them go to jail and stuff. And then a classic malpractice claim because said, you know what, this camera, this program is that discriminating based on so and so, and through so many people actually had them have like a legal issue or a police issue without any validated or consented approach to what they have done. Like if you tell me, oh, actually I'm filming you doing facial recognition and risk calculation and kick you out, I will say, screw you, I'm not going to walk to your store and leave. They just did that without anyone's consent, without any data, without any supervision, and without even bearing the problem, the responsibility of what happened later on until the lawsuit came up. So FDA, oversight and safety and product liability, that's another thing. FDA now has a list of AI-enabled medical devices that have been cleared, and now, actually, only yesterday, I got notifications on both iOS and Android that now FDA is requiring all apps to actually healthcare apps to be declared either FDA cleared or not, or approved or not. And so there is a movement to actually try to put things in track, but the FDA had already failed to organize and manage the industry of supplements in the US for like 100 years. I don't know how old is the FDA, but they have not been able to kind of put guards on that. Are they going to be able to put guards on something like AI? Probably not. So all these are stuff that we need to actually be able to pay attention to. A real-time example about Reuters investigation about a software that runs a surgical robot that helps, and that was a lot of anatomy malalignment that actually caused many sinus surgeries, navigations to actually be botched and cause damage to the patients. So who's responsible? The surgeon who used it, the company, the hospital, so and so. It is a crazy world because you know what? These are coming to actually improve quality and actually save suffering and actually doing the exact opposite. Malpractice, again, who bears the responsibility of anything that happens? Whether it's an ambient scribe that misread and mistranslated the word, is it the chatbot that gave the wrong advice or the wrong triage, or actually the clinical workflow does it get faster or slower? And who actually, if it's faster and you're seeing 40 instead of 20, what's the malpractice doctrine going to be about that? So all that stuff are coming to the edge, and all the governance rules were saying AI should come and support and not replace professional judgment, escalation pathway, and documentation of reasoning. Yet everything is being done is the exact opposite. Chatbots or algorithms actually refusing referrals or refusing prior auth or documenting and just pushing information on patients without even being properly reviewed by physicians who are trying to get through more stuff because they now have to be more productive with these tools. So all these are actually not helping us get from the 95 to 99%. It's actually doing the opposite of 95 to 90, but we're doing 100x more. This is the wrong thing we're actually going to do. Prior AI, prior auth, again, we spoke about. I'm gonna skip this. EHR, again, because these are becoming the hub of our medical data. They have really not been well studied in terms of how they should be able to use data, share data, integrate it to other models or other data sets. So imagine AI outputs coming from these EHRs, how they're going to look like, how like accurate they're going to be. if you remember my talk about healthcare having a data issue where we have very dirty data, very contextual, very kind of sporadic, we cannot use it appropriately. That's why healthcare, all these LLMs are not doing well with real-time patient encounters. They do marvelously with board questions or USMLEs or that type of stuff that we have a clear black and white answer. Our clinical practice is not such. So generative AI is coming there to do more than they actually should be doing, just because they are able to impress on a certain level. But again, generative AI is nothing but a consensus tool that actually has a statistical way to tell you what is the most likely answer would have been given the circumstances. It's not something that's actually been generative in the sense of generation. Patient communication, am I talking to a real person or not? If you look at TikTok nowadays, it is crazy how many people be talking to someone with a humanoid voice and they're completely AI, and how they actually either reprompting them or showing that they are really robots. And they, okay, you are putting communication with a person that way without like proper claim. So you're deceiving me and saying, okay, this is a real life agent, where they're not. So all these are stuff that actually gonna have to come and bear. But what example is that a clinic intake person, and they actually say for someone having chest pain, oh, you know what, fine, so and so, and then that person ended up with a heart attack and dying. There's a big kind of downstream effect of that, and we have not actually thought about who bears the grunt and how actually can we not that happen before it happens, and it's already happening nowadays. So AI is used to generate, amplify, and manipulate perception of medical issues, spreading confusion. Now, this is the age of fake news. AI is like the steroid for that nowadays. This has been the case before the AI became this big buzz, like from 2016, from the first Trump coming to the age of Corona, where we saw how much fake content and fake medical literature that was there that harmed millions of people. And nowadays, you can produce a video from any person, put any medical celebrity or stakeholder, and you can have AI have them say whatever you want them to say against or for something that you are able to decide with, and then you push it to this world, and then it's a battle of, okay, no one knows what to trust, and this is the most dangerous part. So we really have to come up with a framework to say how we can actually do things going forward. And we need to say privacy of data is something that is absolutely a must in healthcare, and any disclosure needs to have proper consent, bias medication, human oversight, and any activity of these. Transparency about, okay, what's being done, how is it being done, is it a real person, not real person. Engaging communities eventually is an important part, because this is one of the safeguards, because they are the direct effect or the direct target of these. In training and capacity building, I don't see much institutions adding training to AI. Like, you as physicians, probably similar to what we have in the US, you do at least, I don't know, 60, 80 hours a year about HIPAA, blah, 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 and sexual harassment. Okay, where is the AI training? Guys, what are we waiting for? This is already affecting our life, our work, our practice, and our patient encounters, and we have zero training and capacity building on nowadays. So again, the boards and health system should actually start focusing, okay, what is the inventory looking like? Our EHR, our call centers, and so on. So how can we validate these processes? Evidence on training data. Okay, the intended use, what are you using this for? You know what? If I disagree with it, I'm going to block it. This is something that no one has the right to go and take that data and do whatever they want with it. The same way you have an IRB for every data research, there should be an IRB for every innovative, say, you said you're going to work on this to get cancer cure. Fine, go. This is what you guys do. And if you do something without it or on something else, you are liable. Even if you broke a different code for a gene and something that is outside of the scope of what you promised to do, you are liable. You're not allowed to do. Disclosing what's AI, what's human, who's reviewing what, monitoring and escalating appropriately to humans. Okay. Take home messages, and we have 5 more lines. I didn't expect us to last that long. The biggest legal dilemma is now whether healthcare will use AI. Already that's gone. We are using AI. Okay, it is whether the organizations can prove that AI-assisted care remains safe, fair, explainable, secure, and contestable. I started reading this book and I recommend it for folks who want to kind of get more about health, AI, and law. This 3 lecture series is actually being influenced by some of the material that is there, so I have to disclose that. I like it. It's not that long. I think it's like 340 pages or something like that. It is a good. Where we are at now is like healthcare law is moving from AI. Can this AI work? To who can explain it and audit and stop it? This is too behind. Healthcare law should predict and prevent harm from occurring. We should have the think tank like scenarios of saying, okay, aliens hacked our EHRs and what can they do with it to destroy us? This is what we need to think. How many of you actually, how often do you see AI advances? I personally see it every few hours. I get notification on all these news and stuff. It's crazy. This race is only the kind of trajectory because the technology might not necessarily improve quickly that much, but these applications are really coming and doing a lot, good or bad, with what we already have in terms of data. We're gonna plateau, absolutely, and this is coming very, very soon. But what we have done under that plateau level is huge and very consequential on us. So this is one of 3 to be continued. Thank you so much, and